This is not the official start of the video, but I am baking today. I'm trying to bake. Guess who has the only set of measuring scales that I own? Honor. So that's going to be real fun. Hello, it's Alicia. I'm good. You know how I'm meant to be baking today? Well, you guys currently have the only set of measuring scales we own. I was just checking that I could swing by and pick it up. No, I'm currently filming this as my intro. Yes, I'll swing by soon. Alright, love you, bye! Hey, beautiful. Cool. Hello.
Hello there. How's the video going?
Well, good so far, I guess. You look so pleased. Well, this will certainly help.
Yeah, I think so.
This is slowly becoming not a video about baking and just a video about cute animals.
I think that's great.
Hello and welcome back to the Sketchpad Pod. I'm Alicia and today, as you can tell, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. So I am going to be baking. I was actually ordered to bake by my lovely cousins who I am going on holiday with, camping to a very remote site in Wales. Don't worry, I am not a big baker, and so if you think this is going to be a baking tutorial, I'm sorry, you're wrong. But I thought, why don't we add something that I do like, which is art history. So we're going to be doing Basquiat and Bake. Nobody asked for it, but you're getting it anyway. Today I am going to be baking from my Great Cookies for Kids book. This is my skill set, this is my skill level. Let's not try and punch above our weight. We are making gingerbread. Oh, so cute. Don't have any of those cookie cutters the aesthetic bakers have. But you know, it's actually about the taste, and I think I have an idea for the shape that I'm going to make the cookies, which will all come together in due time. Don't you worry. Step number 1. Preheat the oven to 180. Okay. Step number 2. Put the flour, bicarbonate of soda, ginger and diced butter into a bowl of the food processor. We don't have a food processor, it's going to be. Process until the mixture begins to resemble fine breadcrumbs. Well, that is a big enough step as it is. Let's just get right into it. So you might be wondering, Alicia, why did you want to talk about Basquiat today? Also, I'm sorry if you disagree with me on the way that I pronounce Jean Michelle Basquiat, his name. I never know if it's Basquiat, Basquiat, I might butcher it, but we're going to try. Why do I want to talk about him? A, because he's a great artist and I love him. I love his work. B, because he just seemed to be floating around my social media recently. I was chatting to someone about a Basquiat exhibition that I had seen, and then I had a power cut the other day, and so I couldn't consume my normal social media content, so I went and saw what podcasts I had saved, and I had one about Basquiat by the Art History Babes, and I was like, you know what, this is a sign, we're just going to lean into it. I think sometimes Basquiat is kind of coined as a A-level artist that you would study at school, and that everyone tries to mimic his style. But that's not to say that they don't do it for good reason, because he is a very interesting artist to look at. And also, he does get a lot of slack for being an artist that, oh, anyone could do that, or a child could do that. No, they couldn't. And we're going to go into why. Shall we get into it? I've got my notes down here. Basquiat was born December 22nd, 1960, Christmas birthday. That's real cute. And he was born to a Haitian American father and a Puerto Rican mother. Definitely, I think his childhood really influenced his art, his kind of cultural background. His dad would play a lot of jazz music. He would later reference, well, you know when you're like 1 gram under, what do I do with that? Oh, and now I'm 3 grams over. 50, okay, we'll go with that. So his dad was also an accountant, and so Basquiat would use old office paper to scribble on. He was self-taught, so he learned to draw through copying cartoons, magazines, and he also went to the Brooklyn Museum with his mum, and it was said that Picasso's Guernica was one of the paintings that really stood out in his mind. Bicarbonate soda, I had baking powder. I don't know if that's kind of the same. I looked at the ingredients and it seems like it's pretty similar. Just 1 teaspoon. He had a lot of strong influences growing up. Notably, he had a car accident when he was a child. So if any of you know Frida Kahlo, you know that she had quite a serious car accident when she was young, and that influenced her interest in her own anatomy. And the same happened for Basquiat. His mum gave him a Grey's Anatomy book after he'd had an operation to have his spleen removed after the accident. You can see in some of his paintings later on, he has a really strong interest and strong knowledge of bones, bone structure and human anatomy. So that's very cool. Flour, baking soda, ginger, the main ingredient, the big boy. We need just 1 tablespoon. Teaspoon, not tablespoon. But he ran away and he did leave home at 17, and I didn't look too much into this. He still lived in kind of Brooklyn, New York area. Definitely from some of the documentaries and the articles I read, you could tell that there was kind of a tense relationship with his father, that he always wanted his father's approval and to be like, look, I'm successful, be proud of me. He was still kind of in the Lower East Side, Soho, New York, and he was originally noticed as part of a graffiti duo which went by the name of Samo, which basically meant same old shit, and it had a little copyright symbol by it. And the other artist that worked on it was Al Diaz, and they would spray paint these tags, which were pretty popular. That was what most graffiti artists were doing at the time. Butter. 115 grams. Cute. The thing that stood out was that they talked about a lot of more anti-establishment, philosophical issues. They would write these slogans along the wall and then sign it Samo. And so obviously those piqued everyone's interest, and they were clearly, quite bright, quite daring, quite cheeky, poking fun at industry and the establishment and kind of traditional art norms. Jean Michelle was like, yo, that's me. And him and Al Diaz ended up having this falling out, and so Jean Michelle went and he tagged around the city writing Samo is dead, so that was kind of the end of that. But in between that, he didn't just initially jump straight from that into art. He was homeless, he was really poor. He was selling like postcards and t-shirts that he was designing himself. Oh, 115 grams, yes, we love that, exact. Until it looks like fine breadcrumbs. I think I have to get messy now. Interestingly, during this time when he was selling postcards and t-shirts and just trying to, make ends meet, he went into a cafe one day and he saw Andy Warhol. So he just walked straight up to Andy Warhol and sold him 2 postcards, and that is the beginning of their friendship, which I'll talk about a little bit later. That kind of gives you a good sense of his character. He wasn't afraid to just go out and make his way in the world, which we love. His first artworks were then included in a historic show called the Times Square Show, and this was it was very notable because it was a big group show and it had, I think, over 100 artists in it, and literally you could just kind of walk up and say, hey, I'm an artist, can I be in the show? But he had a whole wall to himself with his work, and this is where his first art dealer, Anina Nozay, saw his work. Meanwhile, he was living in his girlfriend's loft, and she recalls in this documentary there being a knock at the door and Jean Michelle went to answer it, starkers, and it was actually a reporter for Art Forum, René Ricard, for Art Forum, and he wanted to write an article on Jean Michelle, which was called The Radiant Child, which is also the name of one of the documentaries I watched. By the way, all of my links for all of this will be down in the description below. Anita Nozay, she went to him and he was like, oh, so you're gonna take me on as your client? And she said, but you don't have any canvases, you don't have any work. And he said, well, give me some money, I'll go out, buy something, paint something for you. So she did, and came back, painted these 3 big paintings, and she loved them. And so then she actually gave him a studio, the floor of her gallery. So he had his first solo show in 1982 in Soho, and that went really well. He was with Anita for only a year, and then he got himself a new art dealer, Larry Gagosian, and he went on to have many group and solo shows through the mid-80s. That was his pièce de résistance, in the peak moment of his career. He'd finally made it. He had, shows worldwide, he had shows in LA, in New York. So now it looks like breadcrumbs. What? It didn't say egg? Oh, it has egg in it! I wanted it to be vegan. Apologies, Honor, it's not vegan. I'm gonna have to put an egg in it. Darn it! Moving on. Ooh, isn't this gonna be satisfying? Little professional egg crack. I'm vegetarian, but I like to try and reduce my, dairy intake. But some of the people I'm making this for, well, some of them are lactose intolerant and one of them is vegan, so the lactose intolerant lot will probably eat it with an egg in, but the vegan probably won't. It's a whole thing. 175 grams of light Muscovado brown sugar. So next I wanted to talk a little bit about his general art style. Basquiat tended to use oil sticks, oil paint sticks. He used crayon, he used spray paint, obviously going back to his kind of start in graffiti. You'll see a lot of writing on his work as well in general, lots of text. It was kind of based on a slightly childlike, but not done by a child. Or I prefer to call it illustrative, graffiti-esque figures and images with the incorporation of text. There was also this interesting part that both the podcast and the documentary I watched discussed, which was about the fact that Basquiat was a black artist, and a lot of the interviewers or critiques would associate his work with primitivism, which is such a terrible term. Let's just get rid of primitivism. Doesn't even matter if I pronounce it correctly. It's such a ridiculous word. It's so it references other cultures that aren't Western. Wow. And somehow that's primitive. No. TBSP. Tablespoons. We weren't there for that. And Basquiat, he stood up for himself. In an interview, they were like, oh, your work is very primitive. And he was like, what, primates? Primates? And you could tell just how awkward suddenly the interviewer got. And Jean Michelle just laughed. He was like, dude, I'm calling you on your bullshit. I'm calling you on it. He also definitely did reference his culture a lot, like I was saying. He did cover topics to do with the slave trade, to do with New York police brutality. I think we need to understand that you can be a black artist and your work not always be about you being black. He was a great artist, full stop. You don't have to do something that's to do with your culture, but he did. He didn't just look at it as kind of the political motivations of it. He celebrated his culture. So I was talking about the jazz musicians that he listened to growing up, and that became a big influence. He actually did portraits of jazz musicians within his work and other, empowering figures, which included the likes of Dizzy Gillespie, Sugar Ray Robinson and Muhammad Ali. Not only was he referencing his culture and jazz, music, sports, he always was talking about how he wanted to be in a boxing match. Not only was he referencing all of that, but he was also referencing art history. Like, a child could not do all of the references that he put in his work. He referenced Leonardo da Vinci, Picasso, Pollock. And Jean Michelle, he self-described his work as boom for real, which people sometimes see as just like, I guess, a slogan, but it wasn't just a slogan, it was actually describing the way in which he worked, because it meant that his work was like an explosion of ideas or thoughts across canvas. If you look at the style of like Cubism, it's very kind of structured, even though they're breaking apart traditional figuration and abstraction. It's still, they're placing things specifically together like a jigsaw puzzle. Basquiat didn't do that. He exploded onto the canvas. I love it. It's great. You can just see it's his train of thought, his ideas repeated and repeated. He said that he crossed out text because that actually made you want to read the text more. Like, you're wondering, oh, what's that like crossed out over there? He could just so seamlessly create this chaos and this energy, but also, lead your eye to certain places and make you understand his messaging through his composition and his work. It says to make it into a ball. A ball. So we're going to talk a little bit about his relationship, one of his key relationships. Basquiat was in a 12-year relationship. So this is the girlfriend that I mentioned earlier. Her name was Susan Malik, and she notes that she was with him before the fame and right through that early period of his career. It was a wild time. Like, he suddenly came into all of this money. There would be lots of parties, going to the club. I mean, they were in their 20s. They were just like having fun. But I think he definitely found it hard to balance, that kind of relationship, his 20s, and being like a serious painter, having to actually churn out work for galleries. It got to the point where people would literally be coming into the studio to try and buy work before Basquiat had even signed it. Yeah, and it was difficult because I think Basquiat always wanted to be famous. Not in the fame that we recognise today of that much media attention, but he wanted to be seen as a good artist, and I think it again comes back to wanting to make his family proud, wanting to show that what he was doing was worth something. He wanted his art to be inclusive, wanted everyone to be able to enjoy his art, to be able to see his artwork. Susan says that the point at which she left, he famously had an affair with Madonna, and he did a painting of which Susan was often depicted as Venus in his works, and he depicts a painting where Venus is punching Madonna. So clearly, there was tension in the relationship, but she says that she left, all kind of got too much, but she always stayed friends with him. And he also had a very notable friendship with the infamous Andy Warhol. And like I said, they met very early on, but it wasn't till Basquiat had started to, make a little bit more of a name for himself that they became friends. Andy sort of took him under his wing and became his mentor. Some people said that perhaps Andy had a bit of a crush on Basquiat, but either way, they had a very close friendship, which I think also Malik found that she felt like she was somehow third wheeling a little bit on their friendship. They even collaborated on work together. They did a whole exhibition, which I think they made some really interesting, cool work, to be honest. But at the time, it did not do well with the critics. Andy Warhol was not popular at the time, and they basically said that they felt like Warhol was just using Basquiat. And I think Basquiat, he felt quite torn up about it. You know, everyone's telling you that you're being used, that you're being played. Oh, yeah, I've tasted the ginger now. It's pretty good actually. What do we think, everybody? But yeah, so that argument created a rift between them, and they didn't really speak to each other for a long time, and actually Andy Warhol died quite suddenly before Basquiat and Warhol could repair their friendship. And that is one of the things that perhaps started Basquiat's downward spiral. Here she is, the gingerbread. Oh, don't we just love kneading dough? Yeah. So I'm just going to roll out this dough. Basquiat's main point in his career, where he was really, really popular, you've got to remember he was only in his mid-20s. I think partly it was the pressure that was being placed upon him, and partly perhaps it was just kind of the culture at the time, but he did end up getting addicted to cocaine and heroin. He had points of being sober on and off. He would go away to LA, or he went on holiday a couple of times to Hawaii. Those points were said to be like his better points. The people that knew him when he was there said he was a completely different person. He was happy, he was singing and dancing. He didn't stay there, he always came back to New York. Now for the exciting bit, if you're wondering what shape I was going to try and cut out, I'm doing the crown, the Basquiat crown, which I don't think I properly explained, but the Basquiat crown was a symbol to crown someone as a black king. It was a celebration of his idols, the people that he looked up to, and it was an empowerment generally for black culture, showing them as royalty and showing them as saints. We have our first Basquiat crown. It could be cuter, but it's okay. And we've got plenty more to go. So yeah, basically Basquiat, he would be having a rock and roll time, then he would try and get sober, get clean, and then he would end up back in New York and he would relapse. And I think it was around after Warhol's death, he came back to New York and he overdosed. He was found in his home and he had overdosed on heroin, which is so sad. He was only 27. Only 27. Still, even though he died at 27, he left a legacy of 1,000 paintings and 1,000 drawings. Not only did he leave 1,000 paintings and 1,000 drawings, but he left an inspiration and a legacy to many artists that would go after him. And for that we are very thankful. So I have made up my first tray of 6 crowns. One we can't even call a crown, but it's going in anyway. I'm going to put them in the oven and then I will show you the results. Basquiat crowns, in they go. And that is everything. All my biscuits are baked. I have lots of little Basquiat crowns. I got a little bit creative at the end and I made this Basquiat skull. Shall I do a taste test? You know what? I think it could be more gingery, but it's not bad. I'm pretty proud of myself. I hope you have enjoyed this video, that you have been inspired either to bake or find out more about Basquiat. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know down in the comments what sort of videos you would like to see more of. Thank you very much for watching.